Sam Ehrlich. I'm the wine director for Blue Ribbon Restaurants here in New York City. This is we're here today at Blue Ribbon Wine Bar, which is the Downing Street Bar. Blue Ribbon Downing Street Bar, which is our wine bar here in the Westville. Well, I started in 2003 as busboy at our Blue Ribbon Brooklyn in Park Slope. Since then, 11 years later, I've worked every position, every front of the house position that exists in the group. I've been a waiter, bartender, a manager, food runner, host, you name it, I've done it. Blue Ribbon was created back in 1992 with the idea of being all things to all people. And what does that mean? It means that we want everyone who walks in the door, whether they're coming in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for oysters and beer at the bar, or whether they're coming in at 2 a.m. For a chicken burger. Blue Ribbon made its reputation as a place that chefs and restaurant people went to eat after they got done with work.
Absolutely.
So, I'd like to think that those people still think fondly of us and still kind of admire what we do. The two principal managing partners both studied at the Cordon Bleu. Okay. Eric went first, and then Bruce followed. What do we want to say?
Right.
Where do we come from? And this is where we come from, and we want to achieve a certain level of excellence.
You lived in Burgundy for some time.
I did.
You speak French.
I do speak French. Well, I studied French for 6 years here in New York when I was in school. I did 3 years in junior high school and 3 years in high school. And when I was 16, my mother, who speaks fluent French, she's a really quite a gifted linguist. She wanted me to really learn the language, and so she went on, and this is in 1998, 7. She went on an AOL message board, a French AOL message board, and put up a post saying that she was looking for a French family who would be willing to take in her son for a month or so, for 3 weeks or a month in the summer. And she got a response. We exchanged letters and photos, and then all of a sudden I was on a plane off to this little tiny village in the Loire Valley. As it turned out, it was great. The family were lovely, and my French really improved. It got very solid. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And then I went some years without really speaking it much, but I had a solid enough base so that when I moved to Burgundy to go to viticultural school in Beaune, it came back pretty fast, and it improved pretty quickly.
So that's amazing. Viticultural school. How'd you make that choice?
I thought to myself, I need to see this up close. I need to see a little bit more of this. And I'd never seen a grapevine up close. I've been working here for 2 years, learning about wine, but using all these terms and words, and kind of reading books by Hugh Johnson and Jancis Robinson, which have these sort of funny diagrams of people doing things like crushing grapes. But it was all theoretical, and I started to think this might be something that I'd want to do. Maybe I could make wine someday. So I started to look around, and I had a very good friend who had studied at the school a few years back, and she said, well, you should go over there and check out Beaune and see what it's like. And so that's what I did. I took a trip in 2009, in fall 2009, to Beaune for a week, and got to taste with just a slew of great producers and see the vines a little bit, and I visited the school at the same time and got an application, and I sort of made up my mind after that. I really, I found Beaune really charming, and it's very small. It's 20,000 people. It's the size of the town I went to college in, but it's still it's rural France rather than rural Scotland. I mean, it's really the same thing, I guess.
It almost sounds more like an apprenticeship.
Well, it is that, because a huge amount of the time spent for the first year that I was there when I was in school, a third of that time was spent in stage with a producer. So I got there August 2010. There were 2 weeks of class, and then harvest starts, and so everybody's in stage for a month for harvest and vinification. And so that's for the first 4 out of the first 6 weeks of school is spent working, and then There are periods of stage and then periods of study. So, I spent a week and a half pruning and, racking and bottling. And then I spent a week doing a course on la traction équine, which is plowing with a horse, like driving a horse with a plow, which was super cool. A week of learning how to build dry stone walls, because it's maintaining the walls between the vineyards is a huge part of what people do. Those walls were not only first built by the monks who created the idea of the climat in Burgundy, and identified all of these separate little parcels that we all think are so wonderful now, but the walls are both, they're not only boundaries, but because the slopes can be so steep, they also provide a natural barrier for soil, so that when it rains or the wind blows and you have, the topsoil comes down the hill, there's something there that it's going to keep it in place so that you can scoop it all up, and they literally will drive it.
It's
put it in the back of the truck and drive it back up to the top of the hill, because it's all going to happen over and over and over again. So, so I spent a week of that, and I spent sort of 3 or 4 weeks in the spring in the vines, doing all of the spring work. I'm probably a restaurant guy at heart, and I love restaurants, but there's nothing, I have to say, there is nothing like waking up at 6, being out in the vines until 3 in the afternoon, and at the end of the day you can barely move your arms or legs, but you get home and you sit on the couch and you have a beer and you feel like you've earned it, like you've earned nothing in your whole life. It's a really rewarding, satisfying feeling. So I was very lucky. I had a great producer to do my whole internship with throughout the whole year. I worked at Domaine in Beaune, which is run by David Croix. He's a young winemaker, and he's also the director for Maison Camille Giroux, which is quite a venerable negociant. And Becky Wasserman, once upon a time, nicknamed him the walking winemaker, because the two wineries are a block and a half from one another. David is a real, he's one of the, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, he's gotten a lot of credit. He deserves a lot more. He's one of the leading lights in the region and for the next generation. And then I finished school and I found a job at with Domaine Armand Rousseau and Gevrey-Chambertin, which is about as lucky as I could have gotten. I mean, if nothing else, as a line on the resume in the wine business, it doesn't get much better than somebody like
and the
Rousseau.
experience.
And the experience was amazing. There I was all of a sudden, harvest time in Chambertin and Clos Bez and Clos Saint-Jacques, and with Eric Rousseau and his father Charles, who really made the Domaine quite legendary from the time his father died at the end of the 50s, and that was a great experience. It was exhausting. I didn't have a car, so I would take my bike on the train from Beaune to Gevrey every morning at the 7:04 train. It's the only one that got me there in time, in time for work. So they were early mornings and long days, but it was definitely worth it. And I spent about 6 months at Rousseau. Great wine lists, really great wine lists are great because they present a particular point of view. So if you're, I'm trying to think of some of the really great lists here in New York City. For a place like Gramercy Tavern, they have incredible depth when it comes to variety and when it comes to vintages too. They have Union Square Hospitality Group has a famously great cellar that all their restaurants can draw on, and that's a huge advantage in an era when the economics of wine and the economics of restaurants really don't allow restaurateurs to buy and cellar wine. And you're talking about a list with, I don't even know how many selections. I mean, it gets bigger all the time. But what Patrick does is his markup is incredibly gentle. I mean, it's really, you're talking about 2 times for most of these things. So you can walk into Pat Perle and have an incredible bottle of wine for a really friendly, kind price that you might not be able to, and you might not
A
be
lot
able
of
to
places are 4 times.
do anywhere else.